already recording?
Yes, we are.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Cool. Let's get this party started. Saturday, 10 a.m. on my side. What is it, like 1 p.m. on yours?
Late. Yeah, 1:12. And hopefully the internet's been acting up a lot lately these last few days, so hopefully it will not be a problem today.
The internet has been acting up in Praia. I'm shocked.
That's so wrong.
I mean, it's been acting up out here too, in Brockton, sometimes. So,
Então não saturou, sério, nós estamos no mesmo bote.
right.
Wait, wrong Creole. Nós estamos no mesmo bote. Hoje li assunto é só São Vicente. That's what we're gonna talk about
Sounds,
today.
that's
São
right.
Vicente, for those who do not know, that's how you usually pronounce it in Creole. You say São Vicente and not necessarily São Vicente. You say it, but it's not as frequent. But yeah, so welcome to one more episode. Thank you for joining me. And today is, all the episodes are important, but I think this one has a bit of a special meaning for a number of reasons. One, where we have finally released the São Vicente beginner's course. So this is big for us, right? So we're excited to talk about this here with a podcast. And then on a more, personal note, you have a very deep connection with São Vicente because of your mom, and you always get confused because you be telling people I'm from São Vicente, and then you decide to say, wait, I'm from Sal. We're gonna talk about
No,
that.
I've
And
never
then
said that.
that you from São Vicente? Get that. I have
I've
proof.
never said that. I have
I have
never said
proof.
that. You got
I'm a
receipts?
I got receipts. I'ma find them. I'ma find them. And for me, my
No.
maternal grandfather was from San Vicente. I didn't get to experience him as much as I wanted to because he lived in Denmark for like since my mom was a child, but got
Oh,
to got to
wow.
meet him. Yeah. Look, my
Denmark, of all
grandpa.
places.
Yes. So he there's a whole story behind Vovocic. So he literally escaped the Portuguese. That's how he landed in Denmark. It took forever. He got on ships around Europe, went to Germany or something like that, ended up somewhere else, and then
Wow.
eventually landed in Denmark or docked, I should say. But yes,
Sheesh.
so
Eu,
yeah, so
Cabo Verdeanos, Kriole,
we're
próprios
everywhere.
a dizer coisa.
Yes, and I have an aunt there, and cousins and whatnot. So we are everywhere. But yes, he was from
Yeah.
São Vicente, and a lot of people know him. Like when we bring up his name, so there's a lot
Mhm.
about him that I never really got a chance to experience. But yeah, so it's nice to be able to have a connection, with different islands and have different stories to share. So for us, obviously with Kriolish, we started the courses. We launched the courses with the Santiago beginner course, and now we were ready, obviously, working immediately to release the São Vicente. And basically, here is for us to tell people why this was always our plan. It's not something that we're like, oh, we need to come, we need to release São Vicente. The plan was always this, right? To start with Santiago, and then immediately get going with the São Vicente beginners course. So let's talk a little bit about that, especially,
Mhm.
you did a lot of that work. You were in the studio. How was that experience seeing, doing both of them? And obviously that same concept, identifying native speakers for the San Vicente course. We have CJ, who worked with us on this one. So let's hear a little
Yeah.
bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, so you're right. From the start, we have been very intentional about this idea of trying to represent as many variants of our language as possible. And yeah, we started with the first release for the Santiago variant because the Criollo uh, the Criollo variant of Santiago is like the foundational pillar for the language, right? And linguistically
Yes.
speaking, it so much so that that variant still influences all the other variants, even still to this day. Now, the thing that is interesting about the São Vicente variant is it was the last variant to form, right? The one from Santiago was the first. The one from São Vicente was the last variant of the language to form. And what is so cool about this variant is that it because it got influences mostly from the northern islands, it ended up forming as a variant that is like somewhat of a unifier of all of these of the northern
The
islands, and because
Barlavento.
of that, yeah, and because of that, in social linguistic terms, it ended up becoming the most accepted, quote unquote, accepted variant across the northern islands. And because of that, now you have this situation where the variant from Santiago is the most popular, and the other most popular variant of the language is the one from San Vicente. So it's really cool and interesting how this all of this happened naturally. By the way, right? Um, but yeah, the experience. It was a really good experience, working with CJ. Shout out to CJ. He already is he's a performer, a content creator. When I came to him and I told him how it is that we were gonna set this up, uh, he said, "Oh, okay, I'll just show up and do it." Right? Yeah, because I like this idea of like showing up prepared, and I want to bring people in and give them a feel of the let them get a feel for the studio and the environment that they're going to be in. But CJ was like, "Oh, bro, don't worry about it, man. I'll just show up and figure it out," and that's what he did.
And I got it.
Yeah, yeah. It was 2 days, 2 full days of production, and yeah, we were able to complete the production in those 2 days. Usually Saturday and Sunday. That's how we do it because that's where everybody. It's on the weekend that usually have people have the most flexibility to come in and help us build these courses, produce these courses, right? But yeah, I mean, the experience was it was very efficient because we learned many lessons from the production of the Santiago
Yeah,
course.
Santiago, of course,
Yeah,
yes.
so we brought in a lot of those lessons learned into this production, and so we were able to avoid a lot of the mistakes that we made in the first production. We made things a lot more efficient, but the thing that was cool is that with the Santiago course, we pretty much built the blueprint, right? We built a blueprint and pretty much a framework that could be reused in the production of the San Vicente course. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. We always get to have fun in the studio. Actually, it's
I'm
usually
pretty
so.
sure.
Yeah, when I call people and I ask them to come work with us, some of them tend to be like very nervous. They don't know what they're walking into, which is normal. But then they walk in and they see how everybody's just so cool and chill, goofing around all the time, and their nerves like drop dramatically, and then they just that's when you get their authentic self in front of the camera, which is the approach that we took with the production of these courses. Is we have Brandon, who's our in-house linguist, who brings academic rigor, and then we hire native speakers to then add the authenticity of the language. So yeah, that's how I would sum it all up. And now the course is up. Uh, People are already enrolling.
Yeah, but
And when I say enrolling, we're talking about people around the world, out in the diaspora, right? Yeah, and with this release, I think it means that Kriolish is officially the only online platform that has dedicated courses to multiple variants of the Criollo language. So,
indeed.
so that's a huge milestone for us, and we're still in the beginner track, right? We've released the beginner courses for San Vicente and Santiago. Intermediate and advanced have already been produced, and they're currently being edited. So yeah, stay tuned for more.
Yes, I'm excited. We'll obviously we get a chance to go into that because going from beginner to intermediate and advanced, that's a whole other layer of work and finding doing the right script, finding the right the right people, and because this has not been done, is we're basically testing the waters on so many levels. Where we don't have a shield, we're basically in the front line telling people we're gonna try this out, we're gonna do this. So obviously, I'm sure people are gonna call us out on either mistakes. So why do we do it that way? Why we didn't do it this way? And we'll get it. There's an interesting topic that we'll get into a little bit later on, but but for me, I mean,
Some
for
hot
me, this
stuff
is all,
coming.
yeah, some hot stuff. Like for me, this is, it's exciting just to be able to offer that. Someone had actually reached out to me, to ask me more about, what options, what's out there for him to learn. And he's like second, third generation. And, when I told him, I was like, well, for Kriolish, I can, obviously what you can get a hold of whatever resources you can, depending on your style of learning. Do you want to do in person? Do you want to do, self-paced online? And I told him, oh, we're going to release São Vicente soon. He's like, oh, I'll wait for that, and I wasn't expecting that, reaction from him. So I was very happy that before we even, we haven't even announced it. Most people didn't know we were working on this necessarily, but the moment I said it, he's like, "Oh, I'll wait for that one." So there are people out there waiting for us to, to get this going. And I think between San Vicente and in Santiago, the diaspora part is going to start echoing because our diaspora where people are, depending which island, that's where you landed, right? So in the
Hmm.
US, you have a lot of people from Fogo Brava. You do have a lot of people from, Santiago, but Santiago, folks from Santiago are everywhere. They're in the United States, they're in different parts of Africa, then, they are in other parts of Americas, they're in Europe. But in terms of San Vicente, I'm pretty sure we're probably going to get a lot of folks coming from Europe because they're descendants of
Mm.
either São Vicente, Santo Antão. So it's, I think, for us to see where the students are going to come from once they enroll in classes, it's going to be an interesting observation where the diaspora is going to speak louder in terms of which variant it's folks are purchasing from as Cabo Verdean descendants. And obviously then you have folks who are not, they just want to learn the language just because, for whatever reasons that they have. But in terms of descendants, for me it will be interesting to see which diaspora and which variant is gonna come out the strongest when once San Vicente is a little bit, we have a few more days out there for people to make that decision.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's a really good observation there. I hadn't thought about it in that sense, but yeah, definitely when we see the demand, where the demand is coming from for each variant that we'll be releasing, that can definitely tell us a lot about the state of the diaspora. And we know that if there's one challenge about the market that we're in is lack of information, lack of insights, lack of data. It's very hard
Yes.
to quantify the market that we're in because of that. But hey, in many ways, that probably means that we're probably going to have to create this market, and that's what we will be able to do. Like you put it, when we get to get insights over where the demand is coming from, depending on what we release.
Yeah. And I think right now you can have a slight idea, like, okay, let's say in the Netherlands, right? A bunch of folks from Sunny Cloud or there are San Vicente. So it's like there's certain places that we either know someone or we know historically speaking who's there. So it will be interesting to see if this is what's going to echo as we start, as we roll out more of these specifics. I remember when we rolled out Santiago, especially in LinkedIn, someone asked us, "So when are you guys releasing Fogo?"
Hmm.
And we were like, "Yep, we're working on it." So, so it's a matter of you know people asking that question is because it's something that's on their mind. It's not like they're not
Yes.
asking it just because it's a real fact, and this brings us to the whole issue, not necessarily issue, but a real conversation of island versus region. You will never find a Cabo Verdean or Cabo Verdean descendant saying, "I'm from Barlavento, I'm from Sotavento." I sure enough, I've never said that. If somebody asks me, "Oh, you Cabo
Hmm.
Verdean?" Yes. Where you're from? Y- I don't know anyone who has ever said, "Oh, I'm from Barlavento, Sotavento." You're not. That answer only comes up if the person is not familiar with Cabo Verde, as in terms of islands, and be like, "Oh, Sal is from Barlavento," in whatever, and that maybe that person will get a sense of in terms geographically speaking. But naturally, Cabo Verdeans usually you answer where you're from in terms of your island. So for us to name, Santiago variant and not Sotavento variant and São Vicente variant and not Barlavento variant is very intentional. And obviously the people that we invited to be the ones to teach the courses are from these islands. So it's also very intentional because it speaks to what people identify themselves with. So Cape Verde, the 9 islands, inhabited islands, that's the reality of it. It's like most likely you're gonna say what island you're from and not the region that you're from. Folks don't even talk about region like that unless it's politics, and that's still a hot topic. Or like I said, somebody's learning about the country, and then they might wonder, oh, which part of the region does this island belong to, or whatever. So I think this might catch people's attention, and naturally, like the guy asked us, so when are you going to do full? Is because that's exactly what they think, and they almost always say, oh, my parents or my grandparents were from this island, and that's the Creole I want to learn, is because they also have plans. They want to speak, exactly how their, the parents or grandparents where they're from, so that the communication is there and they're not missing out on anything. Or if somebody no longer is with them, they're like, I want to speak the language that I never got a chance to speak with my grandparents or my parents. So it's very intentional when people want to learn Creole, they are very specific about the island that they want to learn. And this does not, for me, it does not mean one is, better than the other, or, you should do, learn this or learn that. Everybody, they have their personal, take. If you're going to have a conversation from somebody from Brava, the Creole, there's a lot of, there are cultural pieces to this. There are cultural nuances to this, how people express themselves, what they mean in certain things. That if you don't know or you don't understand that Creole, you're gonna miss out. If somebody says something and you don't understand, especially grandparents, I swear they're forever speaking in codes. My grandmother does that a lot. She'll use expressions, and I'm like, here we go. I have to come and write it down. I'm like, what do you mean? And if you're not deep into the, and I'm from Sal and she's from Sal, so and still there are things that my grandmother says that I still have to ask her, what do you mean? Because I wasn't raised, using those expressions as much as as much as she did. But if you miss out on that, I think you're gonna miss out on a lot if you want to connect, especially with the older the folks are. If you don't speak
Mm.
their Creole from their island, you're gonna miss out. You're gonna miss out on a lot. That's how I see it. So for me, there's nothing wrong with being specific to say, "Oh, I speak Creole from." I can speak all Creoles from the islands. I have no problem with that. Some people can, and that's fine. But it shouldn't be a divide issue. If anything, it
Yes.
should allow us to appreciate each other, appreciate that our Creole, as old as it is this diverse, and we can still understand and communicate with each other if we, you know, get serious about learning how the other one actually shows who they are through their Creole.
Yeah, I think context is key, right? Because we tend to like paint with broad strokes, right? Um, like there is a problem in Cape Verde that we do have to acknowledge, where whenever we're talking about teaching the language in schools, almost immediately someone's gonna ask which Creole or which Criollo, right?
Mm,
So, and that does come with a bit of a negative connotation because
yes.
a lot of people will say things like, "Oh, you're teaching the Criollo from Santiago in schools. That's not my Criollo." Right? And
Hmm.
it's like we do have to push back against that mindset because no, if you're say from San Vicente and they're teaching Criollo variant from Santiago in schools, that's your Criollo. That is your language, right? And vice versa. So we are trying to change that mindset on the ground. In the diaspora, it's a different story, right? Because we can't treat every Cape Verdean community as the same, right? We're spread across the world. Each community has its own local circumstances and its own experiences, and they will, with those different experiences, they will form different perspectives. So when someone approaches us and goes, "Are you going to? When are you going to teach, or are you going to teach the Criollo from Fogo?" I understand exactly what they mean. They don't mean that Santiago is not really their Criollo, or São Vicente is not their Criollo. They just mean, I want to learn the language of my family, or the dialect
Yes.
of my family, right? I want to honor my heritage. And this is where I get to 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 sort of like encourage everybody in the field to understand that we are in the business of serving people, and serving people takes meeting them where they're at,
Where they are, yeah.
right? And I say this because, you know, people will say, "Hey, I want to learn the Criollo from Fogo." And then someone will sort of like give them a lecture, right? There's no such thing as a Criollo from Fogo. There's no such thing as 9 different Criollos. It's all the same. It's all one language, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, wait, we need to be careful here. Like, say, let's not give them a lecture like that. Let's say, yes, whether, let's acknowledge that, like you said, they're asking specifically for this, the Criollo from island such and such. They are asking for that because, for very specific reasons, they want to
Yes.
honor their heritage. And we should respect that. And we should speak in their terms, because that is what they mean. They don't mean, in the diaspora at least, they're not saying that because they they don't see Criollo as one language. It's just the way they choose to convey the idea of wanting to learn a specific dialect
That
or
yes,
specific form of the language.
of the language.
Uh,
Yeah.
so so yeah, this is in this is why, for example, when we release these courses, we do speak their language. We do say we're teaching the Criollo from Santiago, or we're teaching the Criollo from São Vicente, because it's just a way of speaking. We're not saying that there are 9 different Criollos out there. No, we're just again meeting people where they're at. This is a way of speaking, right? And this is the way they speak out in the diaspora. In Cabo Verde, I understand it might be a different situation there, because these topics can be very politically charged, but we're not going to then proliferate the political and academic tension that exists there across the diaspora. Because
But
if
it's
we do
already
that,
there though.
yeah, but
No,
but why
it's
but why is that? But why is that? I think it's because people need to be a bit more responsible on how they cover these topics. You can't just take a problem that is highly circumstantial, right? Highly localized, and just spread it and just project it as objective truth. Let me say it that way, right?
yeah, so I think but I think that's the problem, what happened, especially in the US. And hopefully we'll get like someone to come in and talk about what happens in Europe. But in the US, especially me, who went as young as I did, I saw all of that happening. And that's exactly what happened. You had folks who, it's just like when you migrate, you take the good and the bad with you and
Mm-hmm.
you replicate it wherever you go. This was one of them. And it's the politicized shenanigans that was already happening in Cabo Verde. They traveled with folks when they went to the US and most likely Europe. I'm not, I will bet on it, but we'll get someone in here so we can have this conversation again from a more, broader diaspora perspective. But for sure in the US that happened because I started when I started to get older, I started to have these types of conversations because I'm like, this feels like we're just, we brought all these problems with us here in terms of, this Criollo, that Criollo, or the way that we're teaching it. And I think we've talked about this in other episodes before, how a lot of it was felt like they were forced on people without talking to the community to understand who's there and who's not there.
Yep.
How are we going to roll this out? And like you're saying, we need to listen to the folks who are asking for it, right? So in the sense of like from parents' perspective, from a student perspective, I'm pretty sure we never had that conversation in Boston public schools. Like nobody came to us and asked us, oh, we this is what we doing and this is how it's gonna happen in your, your kid learning, through Creole. I just did, like I mentioned before, I learned English through Creole, and I had a mix of Creoles, Cabo Verdean teachers from different islands. But I am pretty sure we never had a meeting. My mom never had a meeting with anyone to actually say, hey, this is what's gonna happen in your school setting. And this was a bigger issue in school settings, and especially around, Boston public schools than anything else outside of school settings. When who is actually learning Creole in the United States, right? I know Harvard University had a Creole class, and some other universities also have Creole classes. The question is, who's learning? Folks who are not Cabo Verdean descendants, do they really care? How are they learning the Creole? So now you have a mix of not just Cabo Verdeans and their descendants in the diaspora. Now you have people who are non Cabo Verdeans who are trying to learn for a reason. If it's because of their job, is it because of they're running for for political positions, whatever it is? They need to serve the community, and loads of them are Cabo Verdean. So now you have different people learning Creole for different reasons. And like you said, we need to be careful because now we have to pay attention to who's the audience, like who's out
Yep.
there wanting to learn the language. They're not gonna understand the shenanigans that happens
And
with
they don't care. And they don't,
and
and this is what I'm
they're
saying.
not, yes,
They
they're not
could care
gonna,
less.
yeah,
When
they just
you
want to learn and figure things out and just understand the basics. What is the alphabet? Because that's the first thing somebody's gonna ask, right? Any language that you have, what's the alphabet? So I can at least start there, right? That's the best starting point for anybody learning a language. What's the alphabet? The moment somebody learns the alphabet, if you give somebody the alphabet, nobody's gonna talk about the island. It's just the alphabet, like how you learn the alphabet, and then from there, how do you construct from the
yes,
alphabet the language. So what needs to happen that I think has not happened, and hopefully, I'm pretty sure Kriolish is what we're going to be in a place to actually push this conversation, is to tell people that we need to reevaluate this all over,
yes,
because what was going on in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000, even the 2000s in the United States, it is not the same. It's a completely
amen to
different
that.
type of people, different generation. And I think now we really have to think about how do we approach this in a more positive way so that we can take away all that negative stuff that's been coming, that's been attached to learning the language or teaching the language, whatever way, because now we have a completely different, context. It's not just Cabo Verdeans coming from Cabo Verde that are pushing it. They're pushing it through school systems. Now you have, descendants who are older who just wants to learn. They want to learn and they want to teach their kids to learn. Now you have non-Cabo Verdeans who want to learn. So, it's a very different world from when we were in school. It's a
Hmm.
very different world from when I was 12 years old learning English through Creole. Very, very different. And we have to be open to that so that we can do better and and teach better. And here in Cabo Verde, your point of it might be different. I'm not so sure how different, because that's also changing here in Cabo Verde. There was a time in Cabo Verde, in terms of internal migration, it was very limited. I mentioned this, and I think we've talked about this before in other episodes, where the first time I actually was able to interact fully with somebody from Fogo was in the United States. It was in Boston. It was not in Sal. I lived here. And I think there was one person in Pretoria who was from Fogo, and that person was already speaking Creole from Sal because he's been there, and his family, they were living in Sal for so long that even they adapted to Creole from Sal, right? So you had folks who barely travel within the islands, especially between north and south, Barlavento and Sotavento. So you didn't have that integration. Nowadays, it's completely different. Tourism in Cape Verde has forced, I will say forced in a sense, because people are looking for jobs, have rotated, especially to Sal and Boa Vista. So now you have folks from different islands, flocking to these two islands because of jobs. So that has changed. So now you have a lot more people exposed, from different islands. You're being exposed to folks from other islands that, you didn't on your island that you didn't have before. So even in Cape Verde, that's changing. And another big piece here in Cape Verde, teachers get rotated a lot. I'll give you an example. English teachers. I'm not sure about the other subjects, but I know this specifically for English teachers because of the work that I do. A lot of the English teachers get rotated. So if someone is coming off of college with a degree to teach English, they get placed where there's a need. right? So I can be from Sal. I just finished my college degree. I'm ready to teach English. No guarantee that I'm going to end up in Sal. Chances are I probably won't. They will send me to Brava. They might send me to Santo Antão. They might send me to Maio. They might even send me to Praia. But that's what's happened with teachers. So now imagine maybe every 2 to 3 years or 4 years, teachers are rotating from island to island. And this is just to teach English, right? I'm not saying any other subject. But that means folks of, the flux between the islands are completely different from when we were growing up. You know what I mean? What were the chances of us seeing different teachers from different islands in our classroom? I remember all my teachers being from Sal. I don't remember my teachers being from other islands. If anything, you saw maybe someone from São Vicente. I don't remember if I
Hmm.
ever had a teacher from Santiago. You know what I mean? But that has completely changed now in Cabo Verde. So even within the school system, you have a rotation that's going on. And it's constant. Like I see this happening. I ask people, so when was the last time? Oh, like 3 years ago, I was on this island. I was on that island. So that's just for teaching English. Imagine other subject or however way the Ministry of Education is structured, where people are rotating. So now everybody's being exposed to every possible Creole that we speak. So it's no
Hmm.
longer a stranger experience for you to be like, oh, I don't understand people from Brava or I don't understand people from Mayu, because that concept almost doesn't exist. And then now you have, inter-island marriage. Let me just put it that way. Sophie and I was talking about this when she was doing her research in New England, right? And I asked her like, so how was it when you had a person that you were interviewing that the parent is from one island and the other parent? She's like, I couldn't have that, because she's like, that's way too confusing for you to have someone who's exposed to two different, variants at the same time. That means their Creole is even more. Now it's all mixed in. You know what I mean? So even in Kavir, all of that is changing. So that's why we really need to we need to pause for the cause, like my sister Selma likes to say. We have to pause for the cause and really think about this all over again. Not all over again, but reassessing where we are now. That is very different from where we were 20, 50. Let's just put it 50 years ago when Kavir became an independent country, if we want to get that serious. Right. But I think we really need to pause because a lot of things have changed completely from what people understand, especially those who've been around the longest in this field more than we have.
Yeah, I mean, and that is why it is important for you to meet people where they're at, right?
Yes.
Because we can't keep forcing our old ways onto people. You'll have to meet people where they're at. You have to, quote unquote, get with the program and just adjust your approach. So it's like when going back to that whole question of like when someone asks you which Criollo do you speak. One thing that I see out here is people tend to say, "I just teach Criollo." Well, not really, because more likely than not, you're teaching your variant. So how about you just say it?
Say it.
You know,
Yes.
yeah, just say, "Hey, I teach Criollo, and it's mostly based on the Santiago variant or the São Vicente or the Sal variant because that's where I'm from. So that's what I'm teaching." Right? You don't want to lure people in, teach them something, and then when they go to talk to grandma in Santo Antão, grandma's going to be like, "What are you saying?"
Yes.
You know what I
And they're
mean?
like, wait, that's not what I learned. No, I
Yeah,
don't
that it's
understand.
it's yeah, you're doing a disservice to the community, right? These people want to learn the language, a specific dialect, a specific variant, whatever you want to call it, for a reason. And by the way, nobody knows what a variant is. Good luck talking to someone, tell them I teach the variant of Santiago. And they can be like, what are you talking about? Right? These are deeply technical terms, right?
Hmm.
Like you don't want to talk to them as if you're, I don't know, going through a thesis or something, just speak the language of the people. I teach the Criollo of this island, and that's okay. That's
Okay.
okay. Yeah, that's totally fine because that is how they mean it. They don't mean it in a way that is like alienating other variants or other dialects, right? Again, there's a generational issue here, and that's why we at Kriolish, we're sort of like being intentional across the board. We're not just gonna take what you tell us to do and just take it at face value and just run our whole program based on what you have been working on for the past 3 decades. No, it's like we have to look at where things are and find a happy medium in between.
And one day I forgot who I was speaking with about how we look at Cavert right now. I think we're so close-minded with independence time and on, right? As if Cavert only existed as of 1975, because everything we make reference, to that. Like there's where I haven't seen folks talk about. So what was like, and I don't mean like the independence movement until independence in 1975. It feels like everything else. My grandmother was born in 1934. My grandfather, who passed away, much older. So it's like they were living in a completely different Cape Verde, right? Still spoke Creole. That's all. That's all they grew up with, is basically speaking Creole. You only spoke Portuguese when you were. It was the same thing
In
when you were
school,
in
yeah.
a formal setting, right? Other than
Hmm.
that, you were not. Most people did not. Were not as employed as folks are nowadays. Their reality is very different. We barely really talk about Cape Verde before that. I was doing a project at work that required me and my colleague to go deep into the research, and I'm talking, you know how I get. So we're looking at 1700, 1800s kind of research. When you read people's journal, and I'm talking about those who came on ships and wrote how they observed the different islands, and you read and they talk about, oh, this is how these people are living, and you're like, oh my God, it's like you don't, and I'm like, we don't know this Cavir. You know what I mean? Like we don't know Cavir before the independence movement
Yeah,
started, kind of thing. You're
yeah,
right. So like we don't know that Cape Verde. And I think we're missing out a lot on, because the language has been around for more than 500 years. It has to mean something, right? We can't be looking at the language just from 50 years on,
yeah. Good
50
point.
years ago. There's got to be more. There's more to all of this, right? How, like you said, how it evolved, how San Vicente ended up being, where it's at right now. And even like all these, the different islands, they all had different history of how every island was populated and by who they were populated and
Hmm.
why they were populated. And I was telling a friend of mine the other day, Kavid bin the Bosch, like literally, the expression, like we came from very rough beginnings. Like who we
Yeah,
are as people. Like if we really sit down, it can be heartbreaking to people if you sit down and think about where Cabo Verdeans, where we come from as people. It's really heartbreaking how we came to exist,
yeah. No,
and
well,
yet
it's
here
not
we
only
are.
it's not only heartbreaking, but it's also like, how did we even make it?
How do we
Right?
even make it?
When you
Yes.
when you when you think about the climate conditions of the islands from way back when, and then there's 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 the whole
the
colonialism on top of it, the war
Yes.
and all that. The famine of the 40s. It's like, how did we even make it
And not
this
just the
far?
40s, and then you have like, and a lot of folks don't know that Boa Vista was one of the most important islands in Cabo Verde. It was the most important economic, politically, important. I'm talking about 1700s, 1600s, 1800s. Boa Vista estava manda, right? It had the largest population. Famine, yellow fever and malaria, all of that stuff. Like there was a time that it killed like 40, 60% of the population. So Boa Vista eventually almost disappeared in terms of, as an island, because of all of these things that happened here in Cavite. But here we are. The Creole is still there. You could tell when somebody's from Boa Vista. You know what I mean? Like there's so much to our history that I think we're caught up in this as if Cabo Verdean identity started in 1975 and on, and it did not. This
Yeah,
is
no,
way before.
I
It's way
think
before, and we need to like start moving and thinking a little bit bigger so that we can have a lot more pride in how our language, where we are now and where it came from and how all of this stuff. But for that to happen, we need to have like open, you know, more open, honest conversations, but also more fun. Like go ask a question, go do some research, talk to your family, and see how things were passed on from one island to the next. And that's just Cavid. I'm not even talking about I'm not even talking about the diaspora, because the diaspora, well, like you said, when you take the good and the bad with you, you also take
mhm,
your language and you basically preserve it. They say if
mhm,
you want to hear the oldest Brava, the oldest Creole from Brava, you go to the United States because they've retained. quote unquote the original speaking of Brava, because now it's not influenced by other Creoles as much as it, here on the island. So you have there's so much around our language that has been, it has carried on for, for so long. With my chat with the last episode with Sophie, towards the end, we ended up talking about all the stuff with the diaspora, and I said, I told her, the one of the first successful Black residents in Seattle, Washington, was Cabo Verdean, and this is 1700, 1800s, and until this day they celebrate him. You know what I mean? So that's a man. You're in from Fogo, like he knows Manuel Lopes. So I'm sure he took his Creole. I'm sure he kept his Creole. Maybe eventually the family couldn't carry the language, but it's like, what is Creole since those time? Like we were still speaking, the language,
Yeah,
and we've been speaking it for so long. So it's like this guy. There's more to this than just saying that this is it. Like this is how we like. I feel like we're making our own language a little bit too small when we worried about these little things of, oh no, you can't say this is what I'm teaching. No, it's okay for you to say. For me, that's what the beauty of Creole is, because
absolutely.
it's rich.
Show pride. It's about pride. It's about honoring heritage, right? So it's
Yes.
okay for us to say we teach the Creole from this island or that. I don't see a problem at all. And by the way, there probably isn't anything technically wrong with saying it like that. But this is something that will bring Brandon on at some point as our linguist to
I
to
know, right?
to
So Brandon
to,
can be
tech
like,
to talk more
chill, you
about.
guys need to stop talking like this.
Yep, exactly. But yeah, just to go back to what you were saying about how we are suffering from this sort of like recency bias, right? We're all acting as if there wasn't like freaking 500 years worth of the development of this language and all of this stuff that's been said and done. Um, and I said a mild F word there. Sorry about that. But sorry, kids. Anyways, but like I was saying, context is key, right? And I was having this discussion the other day with a few friends, where you know I gave them an information that I think very few of us know that. And I got this from Abel Jassi's book, Creole Language, Democracy, and the Intelligible State in Cabo Verde. Amazing book that
I haven't read that.
the
I need to give
what
my I
you
need to
will learn. Yeah, when you would learn from that book, it's like the research that um, Abel Jassi did there was just it's just super super thorough and solid. But in his book, and I'm sure he would have in there you will find references to where all of this comes from. I learned that at some point, in the late 1800s, Crioulo was actually the language of the elite, of the social elite. Like so much so, yes, so much so that people who came from Portugal, they were encouraged to learn the local language because it was the language of the social elite. The problem though,
really.
yeah, the problem though is that language is powerful, right? Because it was around language that we started forming the identity and affirming the identity of what it means to be a Cabo Verdean. So because of that unifying effect that language had,
That it was
it
forbidden.
also it also started causing insurgencies. And it was around this time, and it wasn't unique to the Portuguese colonies. It wasn't just unique to Cape Verde. This is something that they saw happening in other colonies. So around this time, the idea of colonial statehood started forming, where they started forbidding these local languages and pushing the language of the colonizers across public schools in these colonies.
That makes sense.
So
Makes sense from the why they were doing it, of course.
so
Yeah.
so the reason why I
Huh.
think this is very important context to have is that this is where you start to understand that for as long as we don't make our language official, we will continue to perpetuate a legacy of
Hmm.
colonialism that was designed precisely
To
to
suppress it.
reduce and suppress who we are. this is the point that I've been trying to make out there on social media and other podcasts and stuff, because I really need people to put all of this into context and understand the harm that is done when you don't teach your people in their language that they speak at home.
Now that's we need to get Jesse on a podcast and talk about these type of stuff because the like the cultural, obviously, the cultural context of all of this matters. If you're not teaching that again, uh, you know, there's so much to Cabo Verdean history. There's so much that I've learned doing the research at work that I'm like, oh my God, why am I at 8:43 knowing this now? Like, why am I reading this now? Right. So it's the history. And at the same time, it's like, how do we forgive ourselves and be like, okay, now that we've acknowledged that we're missing out on really good information about who we are as people, we got to start doing the work to just, it's a feel good feeling. Like when you actually learn and you understand so many things about Kavit and then how all of this play, how the language played in all of this process. And my favorite thing to always tell people is like our music, our culture is driven by the language. Our
Yes.
music is purely Creole. It's like everything is Creole, and it's such a natural thing that we can't like if we sing, Portuguese is because we're collaborating with somebody or we have an intention as is a marketing intention for whatever the artist is. But other than that, you know what I mean? It's like it's the most powerful thing that we have is our music and it's all in Creole, right? We've talked about this, with different people offline about other things, but it's like it's one of those things that you have and we take it for granted as well because
Mm.
we grew up with it. We're so used to it that we don't stop to think when you compare. If we were to compare ourselves with other, former Portuguese colony, is not if you see the top artists, they're not singing their native language. When they're top artists, they sing it in Portuguese. Like the top Angolan type, Mozambicans that we
Mm.
know, at least those. Then in the Luso
Right.
world, I'm not even going to say Luso
São
African
Tomé.
because a lot of people have that, an issue with that. But it's like all these other countries that Portuguese is still the official language and they have their own gazillion languages that they already have in their country. What's propelling them? It's when they sing in Portuguese, even okay, it's their adapted Portuguese from their country. That's fine, but it's still Portuguese. But most of the artists that I know, if you ask me right now, the artists that I know from Angola, Mozambique, I know them because of they singing in Portuguese. I don't know them because they sing in their native
Mm.
languages, and they have a lot more than we do. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So it's
they
like,
do. It's a
but
it's such a
we
it's
take
such an
Creole for granted.
interesting. Yeah, it's weird how that turned out to be. Like that is such a like out of all of the Portuguese colonies, we might just be the only one who that has the Portuguese former colonies. Let me maybe
Colonies.
be clear. We might be the only ones who naturally, for some reason or another, naturally just held on to our language, our native language. So it's like but yet it's like in official settings, in education, in politics, in academia, it's as if we're like there's still this resistance. Like we're keeping the language at the doorstep. We're not letting it into these spaces because in these spaces we speak Portuguese, right?
But it
And
always
then there's
depends.
yeah, and well, sure, but there's this idea that I really want to challenge to of like how Portuguese opens doors for us in the world. And I'm like, I don't know if I believe that 100% because most Cape Verdeans leaving Cabo Verde, they're not going to Portuguese speaking countries, are they? I know it's a question.
No, it's
Um,
it's because ultimately Portugal was supposed to be your destination if you leave Cape Verde. Well, and then you have
right.
Portugal and in United States. Yes, so it's
So the
not.
question is, why is that? Why is that? Why are most Cape Verdeans, if Portuguese is like the gateway to opportunity in the world, why aren't most Cape Verdeans going to leaving the country to go to Portuguese speaking countries? I think the answer is very clear. It's not the biggest opportunity. It's not opening up the biggest opportunities for us. I think that if the point is competition in this global economy, then by all means, let's teach everybody English. Let's do away with Portuguese,
But
and
yeah, I
let's
don't think.
optimize for competition here with the English language. Then
I think when it comes down to Portuguese, we're not thinking about it in that sense. It's not like, oh, it's going to open your doors to competition. It's really
but
like
that's what but that's
you need
but
to
in the
learn I mean, you
mainstream,
learn Portuguese because that's where
I
that's what it's
get what you're
supposed to be.
saying.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, but what I'm saying is that this is one of the main arguments for why we need to hold on to Portuguese in the country. It's
But I yeah,
because
and I think what people mix, I mean, what they confuse is that okay, when we say make Creole official, or when people talk about making Creole official, that does not mean you're doing away with Portuguese as a foreign
correct.
language. And I
Yes.
think it's is the perceptions, is the setup. And again, we go back to generation, right? Why did Portuguese become the most important language from a formal context, right? There are a lot of other layers to this because back then, if you needed education opportunity, you're not going to find it in colonized countries. Even though it's in Africa, the continent, there are a lot of universities who've been around forever that are old, but we don't know about them because ain't nobody sharing that information with us. Of course not. Why would they? So, in terms of education opportunities, you had to go to Portugal for that. Like I'm talking about, this is even pre-independence. Anybody,
Context is key.
context, yeah. So anybody so it's like you've been dragging this concept for a very long time because in order for you to get an education, the only country that was going to give you that was Portugal, and that was while you were still being on the colonized, right? So now you over there, you're teaching, you're gonna come back. It's like if that generation is still around, they're old, yes, they are very old, but that generation that experienced the first, the early ones who went to Portugal to study, there's a lot of them are still around,
Hmm.
including freedom fighters and in all of that. The
Yep.
democratic folks who gave us our right to vote, all of that, they're still around. So most all of a good chunk of them studied in Portugal because that's how the opportunities are there. So in terms of opportunities, yes, you're talking about if you think education solely, Portugal was the only thing. Ain't nobody sending their kids to Angola, Mozambique, or Santo Tomé and Príncipe, or Guinea-Bissau to go study
Right.
higher ed.
So and this is the thing. This is one of the points that I made on Allowed You's podcast, ABSR channel. Shout out to Allowed You, where I said that we do have independence, administratively speaking, but culturally, there's still a level of dependency on the Portuguese culture. And this is what I'm trying I think it's culture. I mean, if language is the main carrier of culture, right? Ideologies, ways of being,
I probably
whatever.
have to say
That
more,
is what
more than that.
that to me, that is what language represents. It represents an identity and a culture. And for as long as we insist on conducting every aspect of our lives in the islands in Portuguese, we will be culturally dependent on that culture.
No,
Right? To
it's
me,
more.
any language that you have to learn in school automatically is not your language. Automatically, it's not your culture. And that's in every single one of us in Cabo Verde. We speak Portuguese. Why? Because we speak it at home? No, because we went to school. At home, we speak
Yes,
Kriolish, right?
yes,
So the language, the Portuguese language, had to be learned, and
yes,
that is the
yeah.
cultural dependency that I'm talking about. Like when we're getting all of our kids, everybody in the country, to to form complex thought, to convey complex thoughts and intellectual ideas and intelligent ideas in Portuguese, there is, we're essentially saying that our language is not good enough to convey those thoughts and ideas.
But you know what's interesting though?
In other words, the Portuguese culture is superior to ours. This is the definition of mental colonization, and that is what is happening back here. People, well, a lot of us down there, we're still mentally colonized.
No, there's. I always tell people, psychologically speaking, like from your psychological perspective, that we do have a long way to go to disconnect from a lot of things. And like in terms of the for you to express yourself in Creole, and how you, if you can express intellectually in Creole. I think what I see now with this generation, they do that better than they do in Portuguese. That's my take for being here, and I think
I don't know. I don't know. I think that every now and again, when you're having conversations with people, right, debates and back and forths, soon enough,
no, you
Portuguese,
have to look at
s-
the
soon enough,
generation. You need to pay
soon
attention to
enough.
the generation, though. The generation.
I
If we look,
understand. Yeah,
yeah,
you're
the
probably right. You're
generation
probably right.
makes no, the
But
generation makes a
but
big difference. Like
as far as millennials
I've
though,
been around. I've been around. Like whenever this is even before I moved back to Cabo Verde 17 years ago. I used to do a lot of work with consulado in United States. And I
hmm
remember when the delegations used to come through, I'm talking about prime ministers and presidential delegation. I would be like, we would be offline, right, getting ready to go to an event. Those, government officials on the side, when nobody's listening, I happen to be around, they're communicating with each other, or the spouse or whatever. Some of them are still speaking Portuguese. And that's the generation that fought for our independence,
sure.
right? That's the generation that, gave us, democracy and the right to vote. These are the people who, on the sideline, nobody's watching. They're just having random conversation. They're speaking in Portuguese. I see less of that. That I
Good.
can, for the longest time, for as long as I've been here, I'm seeing less and less of that. I only hear Portuguese straight up. If we walk in a room, if it's really, really high officials, you walk in a room, that's
hmm
when Portuguese kicks in, especially if they have somebody else like from another country in there, that comes on.
hmm
Other than that, if you have regular technical meetings come in, if you have a mix of generation, you're going to hear Portuguese and Creole happening.
So you're saying
So
that
it's
maybe
that is certainly changing the way that
yeah.
folks are expressing themselves, and I'm sure it's a generational thing. And I don't blame
hmm
them for I'm not blaming anybody. Why didn't you, like, the first time I heard some folks speak Portuguese that I know fought for our independence? When I say I was in shock, I was in shock because it was an offline. Nobody's watching them. They're not, speaking to the public. And I was like, oh my God, I did not think that these people right here would be speaking Portuguese on the side. And this was me still on the diaspora mode. This is before I came back home here. And then you get to live day by day. You watch and you see things different, and
hmm
is definitely a generational thing. And I think these, other conversations that we definitely need to have for us to understand the generation and why they ended up speaking Portuguese obviously more often than not. And that includes Amilcar Cabral, because everybody's going to fall back on him, right, when it comes down
Yeah,
to
yeah,
stuff
of
like
course.
this. You know what I
And he
mean? So
said
but it's
it
definitely a generational differences, definitely.
absolutely. Again, context is key, right?
Yeah,
Portuguese has served its purpose, right? As far as unifying, for example, the people of Cabo Verde and the people of Guinea-Bissau in the struggle for independence, right? So strategically speaking, yes, absolutely. And it was through Portuguese that our freedom fighters and thought leaders of the time gained their
did what they
education.
had to do. Hmm.
Yeah. So that's fine. I'm okay with that. But like you said, today it's a different story. I'm happy to it's very obvious that Criollo is becoming more mainstream and I think just like you had pointed out before, really, and I really liked this call out that you made before, is that it's due in part because of digital technologies. Instant, starting
Hmm.
with like Messenger, like
Messengers,
MSN,
yeah.
instant messaging, and then at some point we had Cabo Verde Online, which was like a group chat channel, all the way
Yes.
back to when we had AIM. Here I am,
Hmm.
aging myself. Um, and because of technology and social media then comes in, and now the language is becoming more mainstream, more acceptable. We're seeing billboards in the country or even outside of the
In
country
Creole,
in
yes.
Creole. Here in Boston, Mayor Wu's business card has her title in Creole, right? So so it's like the language is just making its way into these channels, right, into these settings, and there's nothing that we're gonna be able to do to to stop it.
To stop it. No, there's
But
yeah,
all
not
I'm saying,
stoppable.
all I'm trying to say is I really wish for people to start, again, understanding the place that the language has had in the history of us as a Cape Verdean people. Understand
Hmm.
uh, how it has been
Oh
intentionally
yes.
suppressed, and how the way we operate today in many ways is still carrying that legacy that is keeping us suppressed, keeping our identity, and suppressing our potential to do so much more. When I was in Japan, and this is a case that I'm gonna try to make at some point, maybe doing a TED talk or something, dreaming high here. Like, when you bet on the language of your people, that is exactly how you unlock great economic power. Why do I say this? When I was in Japan, and this was in 2023, I think. I was vacationing, and I was asking my guide. I was like, how many people in Japan speak English? He goes, 7%. I was like, today? He goes, yes. I was like, wow. He goes, I know, sad. And I'm like, wait a minute. What do you mean sad? Like, do you understand that a few decades ago, you guys dominated the world? You dominated the auto industry. You dominated the gaming industry. You dominated all sorts of, like, you were on the bleeding edge of technological advancement. And you're telling me that you built all of this with a workforce that didn't speak a lick of English? I believe that the reason why Japan rose to be the power that it was then, or that it is today, is because of language. They didn't tell their people, you need to go learn English before you can join this company and build the next big thing in the auto industry. No, they said, you hold on to that language. This is how we're going to mobilize this workforce, and this is how we're going to educate our people. It's all based on the language, and this is how we're going to build Japan into the economic power that it is today. I believe that the day we do that in Cabo Verde, we do away with Portuguese and we hold on to our language, I think that's when we unlock tremendous economic power in that country.
And that two things. One, the Japanese understands the power of their own language. They really do, because if you speak to South Koreans, they will have a very different take on their experience with the Japanese who occupy
Oh yeah, of
South
course. Yeah,
Korea.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
understand that history.
and they suppressed Koreans to not speak the language, right? So they, yes, they understand the power of your
Language.
how powerful your language, your native language, is, and how if you take that away, you don't. So them obviously having that approach where they rose to having an economic power, where only a very small percentage speak English. They understand that very clearly. There's no there is no doubt about that. And when I'm not gonna get too much into this because I don't have a much stronger, let's say I don't have a strong history yet, background between South Korean and Japanese,
Mm.
their relationship. Let me just say that, but I
Yeah,
know
it's a
enough.
it's it
Yeah,
it's a
it's a very
tricky.
sensitive topic. Yes,
Yes,
and
for
I
sure.
know enough. I know it because of me learning Korean. I've going into this, started still learning Korean. This becomes is part of the big part of the element of why people Koreans are so obviously attached to their language, because at some point they lost it and they regained it again. So there's a
Mm.
beauty in their experience, and that's one of the reasons why I connected so much with Korean, because I obviously, as Cabo Verde, we understand the power of having our language. And the other part with, I don't believe is necessary doing away with Portuguese. It's you knowing where to place Portuguese in the society. It's more about where do we place it. It's not doing
Yes.
away with it. It's where do we place it,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's not.
I
It can't be above Creole. So I
I should
think
have
it's,
been more clear on
yeah,
that. Yeah. Like, I'm
yes.
not saying do
Where do we
away.
place it? Yes,
I'm not saying to do away with multilingualism or bilingualism or whatever.
yes,
It's very important when you're bilingual, your brain functions better. Anyways, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is to
yes.
do away with this power structure that we have in place that is based on language.
Yes,
That is what I'm saying.
that's a
Like,
different approach.
what I
Like
what
how
I'm
to, yes, hmm,
yeah, what I'm saying is whatever resource and opportunity we have access to today in Portuguese should be readily available in Creole.
in
A,
Creole.
a, chi-
Yes,
a child from the countrysides of Santiago shouldn't have to to go over this linguistic barrier before he or she can engage and participate effectively in the society that he or she belongs to by
yes,
right, right? You're telling them, in order for you to participate effectively in this society, you need to learn a language from a country that's like thousands of miles away, that's a former colonizer of ours, that's done everything in their power to suppress and do
And it's never
with
contextualized
our
that way,
identity.
though. Yeah, but that's the thing. It's never, how do you say, it's never something that's said so bluntly, this is why you're learning Portuguese. It is just
Yeah,
presented to you. And
and
that's the
that's what
difference, right?
and
It's
that's and
just presented to
yes,
you. So when it's just presented to you, obviously, as a child, when parents be like, okay, this is what it is. This is what's running on the government. Yes. So it's not,
but
we're
that
not
is
blunt
what
about it. That's the problem.
yes,
We're not
that's the
straightforward with
thing.
it, even though that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Again, context is key.
Context.
This is
Yes.
why it's so important to put things into context, because that is how you raise the people's consciousness to understand what is really going on and make effective change, right? So no, to be clear, when and this is the other idea that we need to defeat here, is that every time someone says anything about making the language official, someone is gonna turn around and say something about how, oh, we shouldn't just get rid of Portuguese. Nobody is saying to get rid of Portuguese. Again, all we're
Yes.
saying, just all we're saying, I, as a Cape Verdean, born and raised as a Cape Verdean citizen, I should be allowed to engage in that society and compete effectively in business and education, whatever, in the language that I've been speaking from my crib. I see it as a human right type of issue. Actually, it is.
No, it
Look at that.
is. And again, it's one of those things that are not like when you don't talk about it or you don't spell it out in that sense, like especially a much younger person, because I do think I will always say I'm a believer of youth. I think youth everywhere in the world, they have always changed the world and they will forever change the world. No matter how we look at it, no matter how old we get and we can run talk about all
Yep.
these young people nowadays. No, young people will forever change the world. I'm a true and
Mhm.
true believer, and I'm sure this generation that's coming up, that's them. They're gonna have their own force. They're gonna do their own way that they're going to change the way that everything is done. Well, we need to make it something as simple as this is your language. You do have the right to speak it and learn through it. And that's the end of conversation. And if you start so young, they're not going to, or even the parents, if they know that this is how their kids are learning, as long as the kids are coming home and they're like, hey, my kid knows how to speak Creole, Portuguese, English. And now even Mandarin is introduced in Cabo Verdean, language system, their learning system. So we're introducing a bunch of languages. It's okay. We
Yeah.
need that. Like we need that now. Only now you can hear people say you need English and you need Mandarin for you to compete. Those are the two languages that they bring up when they talk about competition in Cabo market competition. Those are the two languages, English and Mandarin.
Yeah, and look, I'm all for introducing languages, but let's not do it at the cost of
Yeah,
local
no, definitely.
exclusion.
Yeah, definitely. So but it's like where what we have to again, it's like everybody needs to stop for a second and think about how do we approach this where we're not mad at each other when the other one is trying to make a point. Because if you're saying, hey, we're gonna introduce Creole, like when the government introduced Creole in 10th grade, I think that was their biggest mistake. They should have started in first grade.
Yeah.
When
Yes.
everything is brand new, you're so excited about learning, nobody
Yeah,
cares.
and
What you
you're
know what I mean?
yes, and you're prepping and now you're
You're
effectively prepping a
building
whole generation.
a whole generation. That's where it
And
should have been
that is where you
introduced.
start.
And even
Yes.
for the parents, for them to see, because you drop it in the middle of a 10th grader who is almost done with high school going to college. That's a very different approach. And then again, who are the parents of the 10th graders? You got to look at that generation, how they are going
Mhm.
to interact. Whereas if you have a first grader, preschooler, in that generation, the parents of that preschooler and first grader, very different kind of people in terms of
Yeah.
how they are receptive with the language. You roll it out so that you know this is a long-term investment. This is not something that you're going to see the changes as quickly in it's a long-term, it's going to roll out. And obviously then you have another grade coming up, and that's going to be the difference. So I think in COVID we have to stop for a second and rethink some of these things and start from zero, not in the middle, because I think the middle is not gonna, you know what I mean. Here
We
in
have
COVID,
to
in the middle is
yes,
not gonna work. It's not gonna work.
we have to revisit the foundation. That's basically what it is. You have to start at the foundation. You don't
Yeah.
just teach You don't just introduce a program like that when these students are on their way out. You should introduce it
Yeah.
when they're on their way in.
And it's still here in Cabo
That's
Verde, it's like any school setting you go, all you hear is Creole in the hallways. It's still that. It's like nothing has changed
that's awesome.
from when
Yeah.
we were growing
And
up,
that
and
was
it's
my
still
experience.
that.
Yeah, that was my experience in school in Sal. You know, in the classroom, Portuguese, Portuguese, Portuguese. The moment we hear the 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 bell ringing for school for class break, everybody flips to Creole. It's like
But but
it's
even in the
it's amazing to
classroom,
see.
your Portuguese extended between you and the teacher.
That's true.
Because if I turned around to my desk mate, I'm speaking Creole. I had never
But
spoke
how
Portuguese.
but how bizarre is that? Isn't that
Isn't
so
that
bizarre?
wild?
And that is what paints the picture here. You have the teacher, who's an authoritative figure, and you have the student. When I'm directing myself to a student, I speak Creole, but when directing to the teacher, I speak Portuguese. That right there, just that
It's
interaction right there,
authority. It's understanding of
captures
authority.
it.
Yes.
But it captures the power structure, the linguistic
Yes.
power structure that I'm talking about here, and it's
Which
bizarre. It's so bizarre.
which is a ramification of what we went through as people for being
Hundred
colonized.
percent,
It's a it's a
hundred
that.
percent.
I think what happens, and we probably have to start wrapping this up because we won't stay here forever.
I know.
For me, I think the whole this feels like we need to have a conference. The whole thing with for real, the whole thing with in terms of the classroom in the authority that we understand, right? Somebody who speaks Portuguese, and and that has changed from what you're saying. Abel Jassi wrote in his book from before until now. The idea of authority in Cabo Verde, like most generation, I don't know if you felt it, if our generation felt it, but like my sister's side's generation, they felt it more. It's like here in Cabo Verde, you teach authority where you have, your teacher's a really high regarded authority in Cabo Verde. Whatever your teacher says, go. Whatever the
Yeah.
teacher says goes. It's like it doesn't matter. The teacher say you behave wrong, or you behave badly. Your parents most likely believe most of what the teacher said. So you
Hmm.
had teachers, you had doctors, you had judges, engineers, which is still the
Oh
type of
my
majors
god.
that people are going after. Like, but this is what? This is stuff that's people who had some type of degree, right? So that was a reflection of authority. All those people spoke Portuguese. That's how they had to get to the level that they got with these particular authoritative, titles or roles or profession. You know what I mean? So that was a big part of how we were all raised in, so that even when we became adults, we were quick to react to that. Oh, that's an authority figure. You back up. Because we all, it's like that's the psychological part that I'm saying, that we have a long way to go. How do you snap out of these things? And almost always it was coupled with the Portuguese language. Almost always. But
Yes.
with, I do think that some of the stuff are changing, because now I even see teachers outside of classroom speaking Creole with students, because I'm in high schools a lot because of the work that I do. So I'm walking in to go do a presentation about, something. And in the corridors, hallways, the teachers are speaking to kids in Creole. They're
Okay,
not
so
speaking to
that's
them.
interesting.
They're
That's
not
interesting
speaking to them
because
in
then
Portuguese anymore.
because
That's not
because in
how
my
it was for
time,
me.
yeah,
Yes.
for me, even in the hallway in the cafeteria, you direct
Yes.
your teacher to your teacher in Portuguese. Again,
Not anymore. that's
bizarre,
what I'm that's what
bizarre.
I'm telling you. This is a completely, it has changed so much here in Cavite. And that's the importance of those of us in the diaspora to understand what's going on in Cavite as well. Because you left with your experience and you live there, and when you come back home you only come in summer context, and not just
Hmm.
you, that's most Cabo Verdeans from anywhere in the diaspora coming home for the holidays. You're not seeing the day to day, you're seeing the parodia life more than anything else. You're not seeing the schools, you're not seeing the public administration unless you go into the banks. You're not going, you're not seeing what's going on in other, public institutions of the daily life. So you're missing out on what's really going on in Cavite when you're only here on vacation. So it's important for whatever's going to happen in the diaspora, whatever's happening in Cape Verde, because we're interconnected. We're not going anywhere. This is never going to
Hmm.
stop. Cape Verde will always coexist with the diaspora. So now it's
Yeah.
like we got to make sure that we stay up to date with each other in context. Even with Cabo Verdeans in the diaspora, that image of who we were is changing. What is it that we're
Hmm.
doing? we have a lot more successful people now. Less people working at the factories because that's how most people had to start at some point in their lives. Now people are
Right.
moving up the ladder or whatever, right? So even with the diaspora, that is changing how people are. But what's going on here in Cabo Verde, the diaspora needs to also tap into to understand what's going on here in Cabo Verde. Because we're in the
Absolutely.
diaspora, we adapt to our world there. We
Yep.
adapt to that, whatever country you're in, culturally speaking, socially speaking, at some point you adjust to what's going on. And then we come to Cabo Verde and we try to bring that with us. And there, a lot of clashes happen. And I think that's what happens with whenever people from Cabo Verde, and let me just put United States because that's where I know most people are from. When they try to do something together, a lot of times they can't because they're now looking at the world in very different lenses. Cabo Verde has developed and is moving and is, changing and going in whatever direction. The diaspora only remembers Cabo Verde that they left behind.
Yep. That
You
is
know what I
so
mean?
true.
And then those who are here, when they see the diaspora, they only think about the people who left. They think about you as the person who left the country. I
Yeah.
struggled a lot with that when I came here for people to understand why I was even back. You know what I mean? But it's like I love the fact that I actually made that decision when 17 years ago to come back home because now I can serve both worlds better, the country
Yeah.
and the diaspora, because I understand and I'm keeping up with both of them about what's really going on. So obviously the language will always be part of all of this, no matter what. If we bring Creoles from America, from Europe, from wherever, the one thing we're all gonna talk in the same is gonna be Creole. You know
Exactly.
what I
That's
mean? No
what
matter
that's what I'm
where we
saying.
meet. Yep.
This is why we need to really give the language the legitimate place that it
That it
deserves in
deserves.
our
Yes,
in Cape Verdean society. It's the one thing, like, no Cape Verdean community in the diaspora is made the same, right? And
yes,
that actually stays true to the language. Every island got its thing going on, but still, it's the language that unifies us.
it
It's the
is.
language that brings us all together, not only in the country, but also across the world.
And the diaspora. Perfect ending, Edmar.
Perfect ending. All right, I
I'm
just want
out
to say
here.
this. Look, we have released the São Vicente Kriole beginner course, or São Vicente Kriole beginner course, because that's how
Creole.
you say it in
Mm-hmm.
São Vicente. And we're gonna keep putting out these courses specific to each island, as many of them as we can, because again, this is about honoring our heritage. It's about giving people in the whole wide world direct access to their heritage. So, and it's about pride. It's about pride, showing pride for where you're
Whole
coming
lot.
from, for your heritage, your lineage, your language, your criollo or your Creole.
Or you're Creoling, as Mars now is making fun of my Creole from Sal. Because the other day he told me, I'm Badiou. Straight up.
Oh, yeah. So
Yes. I was
funny
like,
thing
hey.
though. Like you know what's funny? Like I know, of course I'm happy with releasing the São Vicente Criollo course, because my family is mostly from São Vicente. I was born in São Vicente. I was there for like a month as a baby, and then I went to Sal.
Let's all get that clear. He was only there
So
for a month.
yes, so I'm Salins. I'm from Sal, right? But what's funny is that because I grew up in Sal, in a household with parents speaking San Vicente, I ended up forming a type of Creole that
Very
honestly, like,
confusing.
when when I'm in Sal, I have friends telling me to stop speaking San Vicente.
Some said, yeah.
But when I'm in San Vicente, my family members or in my family relatives and friends out there tell me to stop speaking Sal, and I'm like, you know what? Maybe I just have my own flavor of Creole. This is the Edmar Creole, so you guys are just gonna have to deal with it.
Just deal with it. Because they will come out. That's the thing. It's like the certain words and certain expressions. Like sometimes at work I say, we speak English and Creole at the same time. And I'll say something. They look at me. I was like, Salfunda. So I'm like, yeah,
Yeah,
that's that deep Sal. And sometimes it just comes out. And mind you, I'm not around people from Sal all the time here in Praia. So yes, I
yeah.
get I
There
get
are
what you're
friends I go
saying. Yes.
when I say stuff like yo zip que, like I told you that, matter
Yeah.
Sal. People from Sal go, yo, it's not z, it's fla. You say flop, flop. You don't seem zip. Que gente São Vicente. I'm like, oh my God, here we go. Here
It's a very yes, it's very interesting how we all bicker at each other and yet it's all mixed in. It's all a
Hey,
mess now.
it
We
works.
all true
It's still working.
matriculadas.
Still works.
It still works, yes.
That's right. All right,
Yes.
Suely, this
But
was awesome. Thank you for
this
putting
was
this together
awesome.
once again. Yeah,
And yeah,
looking forward to the next one.
thank you all for joining us. Y'all know the deal. Website Kriolish.com. Follow us on social media. And we're gonna keep doing our thing. As always, we're open to, recommendations, suggestions, not just, the courses released, any other topic that you all think that we should be addressing either with podcast or, more on the cultural side, language side. Let us know. We love to hear from you all. We appreciate you for
Yeah, and
sticking
please,
through and
for those listening and watching, tell us in the comment section which island would you want us to release a course for. That
you
I
about
want
to
to
say
see
which Creole.
which Creole, which island, which variant.
I was like, wait, he stopped for a second. He had to think which
I know.
terminology.
You see,
You was like, yeah, I got you.
I'm just
Okay,
gonna,
all good,
from this point, I'm just gonna let it come out naturally. It is what it is.
all good.
All right.
Thank
Thanks, yo.
you. Have a nice
Peace
weekend.
out.
Peace.
See ya.